Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now, in this video, we're going to be going through the performances of the presidential candidates that have so far been interviewed in the ongoing presidential debate series being hosted on NTA by Kadira Ahmed. So we're going to be taking a look at the performances of the people that have taken part so far, and really we have had the three main protagonists being interviewed already. So they have been interviewed already, the three front runners, and the next Nigerian president is going to come from either President Buhari, Abubakar Atiku, or Omoleye Sowore. So there's nobody that is going to preside over that country outside of those three names, and those three names have been interviewed. So the next Nigerian president effectively has been interviewed. So now we're going to go through their performances in the debates, and then we will, from that performance, try and anticipate who the next Nigerian president is likely to be. So first up is President Buhari. Now, President Buhari, of course, was the first to be interviewed, but I say President Buhari was the first to be interviewed. Anybody that watched that interview will quickly correct that and say, no, President Buhari was not actually interviewed. President Buhari just turned up and sat there looking ornate. He was like an ornament there, whilst his vice president Yemi Osinbajo was interviewed, because President Buhari barely participated in that debate. He did not really have a full grasp of what was going on around him. The presenter, Kadira Ahmed, tried her best to help him out. So she slowed down the pace. She asked the questions 3-4 times. She asked the questions in simpler language, and she tried to tone it down. Still, President Buhari appeared confused and befuddled. So he appeared confused and befuddled, and as he's owing and ahhing, his vice will quickly jump in and give a more articulate, a more rounded answer. I would say articulate as opposed to being accurate. So being articulate, of course, is completely separate from being accurate, but at least is able to articulate an answer to the question that's been asked. In contrast to President Buhari, who just seemed to have he seemed to have glazed over completely and had no grasp of the environment that he was in. Never mind what is being asked of him. Please don't take my word for it. There's a video of that interview on this channel, so if you go through my playlist, you will see the interview for President Buhari, and go and watch that and you will see exactly what I mean. So now we've had President Buhari interviewed. So next up was Omoleye Sowore. Now, when Omoleye Sowore was being interviewed by Kadira Ahmed, it was as though he was being interviewed by a completely different person, because the Kadira Ahmed that we saw interviewing President Buhari was a completely different entity from the Kadira Ahmed that interviewed Omoleye Sowore. The Kadira Ahmed that interviewed Omoleye Sowore was very punchy, was very sharp. There was a real bite to her, and fair enough, you should never give any of these politicians any quarter, and the job of the presenter is to try and nail them down, because politicians in essence are very slippery characters, and that includes Omoleye Sowore as well. All politicians by definition are fairly slippery characters. So it was good to see that she got her bite back, because if you had watched her interview with President Buhari, you'd have thought she had lost her mojo, because she was virtually spoon feeding him. It was like an elderly grandparent that you're having to look after because your parent had gone out for the day, and you say, oh, would you like a cup of tea, grandpa, or something. That was the sort of interview that Kadira did with President Buhari. So it was good to see that she got her bite back when she interviewed Omoleye Sowore. But Omoleye Sowore, of course, is never backwards in coming forwards. So it was effectively a meeting of March. You know, it was a clash of the titans. No victor, no vanquished. He was up to par. She was very punchy, and he made for a robust conversation, and they drilled down into the minutiae of the details of what Omoleye was proposing for the country. So it was a thorough, detailed, no-holds-barred interview. So very good. We only wish that she started with that tempo with President Buhari, but then that was a soft sell interview. But we've already said that. So we had that punchy interview with Omoleye Sowore as a second interview. So now, yesterday, she had a third interview, and for me, effectively her final interview, because the three proponents, like I said, Buhari, Sowore, and now Atiku, have now been interviewed. So yesterday she had a final interview, by my reckoning, with Atiku. So now, Atiku again, like Sowore, was he came prepared. He was punchy. He was ready. He knew what the questions were going to be. They did not give him the question, of course. He didn't get any expo, but all the questions that are likely to come out in an interview like that are fairly commonplace. So they're going to obviously start off with the corruption, because obviously corruption is the tag that they're trying to attach to Atiku's name. So he had prepped himself, obviously, for all the prep obviously means prepared. So he would have prepped himself for all the corruption-like questions that was likely to come up, and obviously he'd have gone through the details of his policies as well, and the marquee elements of the economy, of course, are security, rebasing the economy, education, and health. So really, those are really the three parameters within which the Nigerian society functions. That's the gravitation of Nigeria at the moment, because that's where the core concerns are. So he'd have been prepped for those, and he was prepped for those, and he was sharp, he was alive, he was alert, he was suitably robust in the way that he presented and articulated his thought. He was presidential in his presentation, and he seemed alive to the situation right in front of him, in absolute contrast, as you might guess at what I'm hinting, in absolute contrast to Buhari. So now we've now had these three interviews, and Peter Obi, by the way, his vice, was not backwards in coming forwards. So he was also equally sharp. He also knew his numbers. I don't know how well those numbers match up, but they did say they have a fact check team in the back room. So everything that he was saying was being fact checked, and it could have been pulled up on him or on them if they found them inaccurate. And I think it was pulled up once, and he was able to present a position, but he wasn't really that pulled up. So clearly he knew his figures, at least he knew the roundings of the figures, and he had a good grasp. And the way Atiku articulated his, and I think that's a good play on word, by the way, Atiku articulated. I wonder if they're using that for their slogans. So the way Atiku articulated his intentions for Nigeria was quite, there was a rhythm and a rhyme to it, and it made sense to logic. So the devil is always in the implementation in Nigeria, because Nigeria is never short on ideas on how to grow the country, but certainly the guy that is proposing to helm the country is able to articulate a thought that coheres is really a great thing, because we've really only had, we've only had three presidents we've only had two really presidents. No, I think we've only really had one president that's been able to articulate a thought in a way that coheres, and that was Yar'Adua, who didn't last for about 6-8 months before he died. He had the intelligence to describe his vision for Nigeria in a way that you could see the sense of it. So you didn't necessarily have to agree, but you could actually follow through the logic of what he had to say. Goodluck Jonathan did not have that articulation, although he had the policies, but he's not articulate. But the person that was able to articulate in the way that Atiku articulated was that, in my memory, was Yar'Adua. So from Yar'Adua, I think maybe Gowon as well, because if you look at old clips of Gowon, he was erudite too. And then if you go back to Ahmedu Bello, he also was able to articulate a thought as well. So certainly, but in recent times though, in times of memory, in the times that we live in, the only president that's been able to describe a thought or a vision in a way that will resonate with logic and common sense was Yar'Adua. And the next incantation of that now is now what we're seeing with Atiku. So that is my summary of how I have viewed all the three interviews so far. So now, having gone through all that, what is the conclusion? Okay, so let's go through. Malam Buhari, he wasn't really there. This is a gunman. He is gone mentally. His brain is no longer in full function. He is debilitated by ill health. I'm not qualified to say if early dementia or senility is setting in, but it doesn't appear as though he's a man that is in full grasp of his function. And if a man is not even in full possession of himself, then how can you ask him to head a government that is going to have oversight over the lives of 200 million people? That's the height of irresponsibility. And don't even say that you have a presidential team and you have Yemi Osinbajo, because if Yemi Osinbajo is going to be running the country, then he can run for president. So if Buhari says he is running for president, then he as president should be able to articulate what his intentions are, because it is in that articulation that we are able to then determine that if he's suitably imbued, if he has the full function and grasp enough to inspire the confidence that is asking us to repose in him. So he's not asking for an abstract, he's asking us to place our lives in his hands. And if he doesn't even have full control of his own life, then why would we place our own lives in his hands? And if they say they have the presidency to back him up, then the presidency, whoever that person is going by that title, because we elect a president in Nigeria, not a presidency. They're saying they work as a team, but we elect somebody to head, because there's always a final decision to be made, and that final decision comes to the head. And if you don't have that confidence that Buhari is in full possession of himself to be able to make a decision, then really we're in trouble. So really, in reasoning, Buhari really should be a non-starter. It should be a non-starter. So the contention then should be between Omoyele Sowore and Abubakar Atiku. So now, with Omoyele Sowore, he has the articulation as well, and he has the plans, he has the understanding of the times that we live in, and he has the drive and the zeal, and more importantly, the energy as well to push it through. So now, Atiku also has some of the hints of an understanding of the times that we live in, so he's not backwards in a way that you would say that somebody like Buhari is backwards. So he's not backwards, so definitely he has that in his favor. And not only is he not backward, he actually has a forward thrust. So it's not just the case that he is not backwards, he is actually pushing forward, which are two different things. So one, not being backwards, and secondly pushing forward. So there are two different things. So he has both of those going for him, and he has both of those going for him only really because we are contrasting that as an asset weighed against the incumbent, who is now a man in open glare debilitation, and a man that is unwell and that really needs to be rested and nursed, so that's the contrast. So now we now have Omoyele, and then we have Atiku. Now they both have pros and cons. Omoyele has more pros, and Atiku has more cons. And really, if we needed to make that seismic shift, that paradigm shift, which is necessary to make that final leap from the past to the future, we really need to break loose of both Atiku, Buhari, and people of that generation, and then make that generational leap with Omoyele Sowore. But really, if we know Nigeria, then we know that Omoyele Sowore's bid really is going to be a flash in the pan, and it's going to be a big splash, but he's never really going to be the president for all of the several reasons that we're all aware of. And I would personally like him to be president. My personal choice, I've always said, is Kingsley Moghalu, but Kingsley Moghalu is not really in the running. So out of the people in the running with a realistic chance, my default of obviously will always go to Omoleye Sowore, because he's able to identify the problems with Nigeria, is able to prefer solutions, and is able to detail the costings of those solutions, and is able to tell us where everything is going to come from that he intends to do. So he's able to describe it in a manner that we understand. But in terms of the practicalities, they talk about political structures in Nigeria. So if you look at Omoleye Sowore, he has traversed the whole length and breadth of that country, and he has built a structure for himself right across the whole of that country. And in terms of drive and energy, and the drive and energy again you see in his campaigning, because he has gone to all the four corners of that country and twice again, you know, so he has definitely put in the work. There's absolutely no doubt in that. So, but in terms of the actual accoutrements that you need to win an election in Nigeria, there's a lacking there, and that lacking is in terms of political supporters, is in terms of money politics, because in Nigerian politics is money politics. So when they mobilize people in Nigeria, they don't mobilize people in Nigeria in the manner that Sowore is going to mobilize them, going from door to door, which is effectively what he's done. He's gone around the whole of Nigeria and has knocked on every single door in that country and had a conversation with the household. That's effectively what is done. But the way Nigerian politics is done is that they target a group of people. Let's say, for instance, a group of market women based in a certain market. They have their market association, and then come election day, the leads of the market associations are canvassed. They are given money, and then their whole group goes and votes for the candidates that's been decided that is the one that they want. And that's effectively how the Nigerian political structure is. So now, what people like Omoleye Sowore, etc., are trying to do is to sensitize the Nigerian public to the value of their vote, so that they understand that instead of that group voting, vote to your conscience, because that's effectively how you're going to have that shift that would liberate you from the chains that that group that is holding you back is using to chain you down. But we are not there yet. So in terms of who actually has a realistic chance of winning the Nigerian election, the best possibility is for Atiku. You know, he really has the most chance of wresting power from Buhari. But will he win though? That's a different thing. And now, in a free and fair election, Atiku would win. I think there's absolutely no doubt about that, because Nigerians have suffered under Buhari, and they have seen Buhari also is a man that continues to debilitate in health, and he gets older and older, and you don't get better in your 70s and 80s as opposed to your recovery in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. So he's a man that is starting to wane in health. He's starting to wane in health. He's completely waned in health. So he's a man really that really needs to be sat in his couch in his forecourt and having his grandchildren run around him. That's really the stage of life he is in now. He's in no fit state of mind or body to run a country like Nigeria. Absolutely not. So in a free and that has been identified as well. So in a free and fair election, Buhari will definitely not win. But we all know that election is not going to be free and fair. We've seen the lead of the Justice Department sacked. We've seen how they handled the Ekiti and all those elections when they mobilized forces. We've seen now Shibanjo going around the markets handing over 10 naira to women to buy their votes. So it's definitely not going to be a free and fair election. But in a free and fair election, this is the best chance that Atiku has of becoming president of Nigeria. And I personally would rather Atiku was there, because he has the vision that tallies with my outlook more so than somebody like Buhari could ever have. Buhari's idea is to cut a continuing path for Fulani herders to be able to herd cows across the country. So never mind hospitals being built and developments being brought closer to the people. His own idea is just to have the cattle continue to go through. So how are we? What is going to happen in 10 years time, in 20 years time, in 30 years time, in 40 years time? Are we still going to continue to have this cattle herder mentality with their people herding cattle up and down traversing the country? It's just a ludicrous. So this is sort of mindset that Buhari is bringing to the party, and a cake, a mundane, a tribalistic, a low rent, low IQ sort of outlook. So really, those times are long gone. I know those times really went out to the 70s, So we're in 2020 something now. So really, it's a man of the past. So Atiku, the best option. If I had the vote, if I was in Nigeria, I'd probably vote for Sowore and wait for him to be declared. And if he was not declared, then I would wait for Atiku to be declared. And if Atiku was not declared, then I just pack my bags and leave the country. So let me know what your thoughts are. Those are mine. I'll share thoughts in the comment section on this channel. My voice is going, so I'll leave it there. Meet you in the comment section. I'll say peace.